Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Jason, and the fact that we are having 2 videos in a row really does prove that December is magical. Magic everywhere. I typically am not a big fan of Christmas and like the whole holiday thing, but I don't know. I feel like this year, because we've skipped so many holidays, we've skipped so many celebrations, I'm just kind of here for it. Like, I saw like twinkling Christmas lights the other day and I didn't want to throw up, so growth. Today I'm going to be showing you everything that I read in November. Now, normally you'll see me holding a huge pile of books, and while I did read several good books this month, I didn't read as many books, and the main reason for that is, well, there's a lot of main reasons. I mean, we started off November with, regardless of what side you were on, a nutball crazy election, right? And then NaNoWriMo, and then I adopted cats. Like, November was a lot. A lot of things happened in November. So, without further ado, let me jump in. If you haven't already, feel free to subscribe. I make videos once every 12 years, and I would love to have you here when I do that. Okay, so starting off November, I read Surrender Your Sons by Adam Sass. This book was very highly recommended. There's a lot of hype behind this book. A lot of people really spoke highly of this book. Essentially, this is a book about a young man who comes out to his mother, and she ends up sending him to a gay conversion camp. I really like what it had to say about just like being yourself and found families and things like that, but it has kind of this like, it kind of balances this weird line between like the darkness of conversion therapy and then, but it also had like kind of a dark, twisty sense of humor. And I had a hard time kind of like writing that line with the author. Like, it went back and forth in such a weird way that I was always like, is this supposed to be funny or no? I'm not sure. The other thing that was a little tricky for me about this book is that like most of the actual events of this book take place within a span of 24 hours. And realistically, a lot of the things that happen in that time period don't seem to me like they could happen within 24 hours. And sure, like events, like actual physical events probably could, but there's a lot of like emotional development that the characters go through and like kind of falling in love with certain characters, things like that. I just feel like 24 hours is such a short time frame for anything of that nature to happen. It kind of like broke the reality of it for me a little bit. Overall, I think Surrender Your Sons is a very interesting book, and I definitely wouldn't tell anybody not to read it. I think it's very, it was a very captivating book, and it was definitely different than a lot of things that I've read, especially in the young adult space. I feel like this book had a very different vibe, very different story than I've read in anything else this year. But I don't know if it was necessarily, it wasn't one of my favorite books I've read this year, but a lot of people have really loved this. So if anything I just told you about like what the book is about and like kind of the concept, it sounds interesting to you, then I would say give it a shot, because a lot of people have really, really enjoyed the book. I was just a little on the fence with certain things, kind of broke the reality of it for me. Next up, this was actually probably my favorite book that I read this month, which I don't know if I expected it to be, but this was Super Fake Love Song by David Yoon. I really like David Yoon's writing. It's very quirky and kind of silly and fun. I really loved his first book, or his book before this, which was Frankly in Love. Essentially, this is the story of a young man who's like super nerdy, plays D&D, goes LARPing, all of these amazing things that I love. And this new girl comes to town. Her family and his family are kind of like meeting, and they want him to show her around. And she mistakes his brother's room for his room. Now, his brother is like off in LA trying to become a rock star. So he, like, his bedroom looks like he's really cool. He's got guitars and like punk and like rock and metal and all that stuff. So the main character decides then that he is going to pretend to be a rock star in order to win this girl over. And in doing so, he ends up like getting his 2 nerdy friends to start a band, and then they actually like learn how to be rock stars, kind of. It's like kind of this idea of like fake it till you make it. But then it also deals with, you know, his relationship with his brother, and his brother, you know, trying to be a rock star and how that didn't work out for him, and deals with family. And I just really enjoyed it. It just, I don't know, it just was like a feel-good book, and I liked the nerdiness of it, and I just liked it. It was like, to me, it was kind of like a John Hughes movie from the 80s, except it said it's modern day, but with like representation. And I really like stuff like that. So I thought it was a lot of fun, and I recommend it. That's Super Fake Love Song by David Yoon. Okay, next up is the book that took up most of my month. I thought I'd be able to read it in 2 weeks. It took like 4, which was Oathbringer by Bryan Sanderson. Now, the whole reason I was reading this was because Rhythm of War was coming out, and I wanted to be ready for it. And what's funny is that by the time I got done reading this, I definitely knew that I would not want to read Rhythm of War right away, because this book actually kind of like exhausted me a little bit. And I knew that I wasn't ready to jump into another really long book. I really have loved the Stormlight Chronicles, Stormlight Archives so far. This was probably my least favorite of the 3. That's not to say that I didn't enjoy it, because I did, but I thought that overall pacing-wise, I thought the pacing was very odd. Like, I had like, you know, the first two books definitely have the progression we are used to in storytelling. So this rising arc, and then this climax, and then a resolution. This book had like little, like almost like mini arcs throughout the entire thing. And I don't know, it just never... It never had that like, oh my God, I can't wait. Like, I can't wait to figure out what happens next feel for me, which I definitely remember having with Way of Kings and Words of Radiance. I definitely had that feeling of like, oh my God, this is so epic. What's going to happen? Oathbringer, I just never really got there with this book. And I don't know, I can't really tell you why that is. I do think it was the pacing. I think the pacing of the story is just like a little more disjointed than the first two books. I'm still very excited to read Rhythm of War. This definitely did not put me off of the series, but it just wasn't my favorite of the books so far. But that being said, I still gave it a 4 out of 5. Like, I did enjoy it, and I thought there were a lot of really great moments, a lot of really great things added to the mythology of this world. I really enjoy a lot of the characters in this world. I love Kaladin. I love Shallan. It's great seeing them continue their journey. And yeah, I'm excited to read Rhythm of War. I'm just not ready to read it yet. Ooh, this next one. I read a lot of, like, books that I was very, like, about this month, I guess. So this next one is Memorial by Bryan Washington. I picked this up from Book of the Month, and this was also one of the choices for Book of the Month from Barnes & Noble. So I was like, and when I read the description, I was like, yeah, I definitely want to read that. I mean, one of the characters is Japanese-American, one of them, and he works in a Mexican restaurant, and one of them is a black daycare teacher. They're both, you know, they're in a relationship together, these two guys, and kind of the concept is one of them, the Japanese-American guy, his mom is coming to visit, but at the same time, he finds out that his father is essentially dying. So he goes back to Japan to kind of like spend time with his father until he dies, and then he leaves his mom in their apartment with his boyfriend. And they've never met before. And so already, this is like a very kind of weird setup for a story. It's already, like right off the bat, I was like, I don't think this would ever happen. And the thing about this book that, okay, let's just back up. I feel like whenever I think about this book, I just have so many thoughts that come at once that I can't seem to form them together. So first and foremost, what this book is about is it is about dysfunctional relationships with your family, with your partner, just dysfunctional relationships in general, okay? But what this author does in not a very long book is shoves so many kinds of drama into one book that it's almost like overwhelming, and it almost like numbs you to the drama, if you can imagine. So the way that I described this when I was talking to somebody about it was I was saying that, you know, think of a television show that's really dramatic, like Grey's Anatomy or This Is Us. Imagine taking an entire season's worth of drama and finding a way to put it all into one 45-minute episode. That is what this book feels like. It just feels like nonstop crazy drama of every single kind, and it's almost like the author felt like they had to get every form of drama in there. Like, do we have class issues? Do we have gender issues? Do we have racial issues? Do we have family issues? Do we have HIV? Do we have, like, all of these things just are, it's just too many things fit into one small book. I think if you're going to do all of that drama, I think of a book like A Little Life, which is a very dramatic book. But it's long. It's a long book, and it has a lot of time to develop all those different kinds of drama, and then the payoff and the story is, I mean, it's heartbreaking, but you build to that point. There just was so much drama all the time, and that's the other thing, is the main couple, I never once could understand why they were together, because the thing with dysfunctional relationships is I feel like you at least have to have those moments of like building that relationship together so that when it gets dysfunctional, you understand why they stay with each other. I don't feel like we ever got that. So really, they were just two people that did not like each other, that were with each other for no good reason, and then they had to deal with each other's families. And, you know, the more I talk about, when I finished reading this, I was like, okay, well, that was okay. But the more I talk about it, the more I feel like I just really didn't enjoy the book. It's just not an enjoyable read. I don't think it's made to be an enjoyable read. I think it's made to be like an introspection of dysfunctionality. But that being said, it's done in such a fast, high-paced, shove drama down your throat way that you never really connect with the story and the drama. And I really, really wanted to, because I really like the concept of what the author is trying to do, but it just never clicked into place for me, unfortunately. Oh boy, if you thought I had a lot to say about Memorial, this next one. So the last book I read for the month is Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline. First and foremost, let's get out of the way that people who love Ready Player One, there are people who love Ready Player One and people who hate Ready Player One. It's a very divisive book. If you liked Ready Player One, I do think you'll enjoy Ready Player Two. It is kind of more of the same. It feels very much like a second round with these characters. There is another Easter egg they're hunting to get to, but the stakes are much higher this time because basically they are held, I'm going to try really hard not to spoil anything, but they're basically like held hostage and told if you don't complete this Easter egg, a bunch of people are going to die. So it's a much higher stakes. And what's interesting is that we follow these characters who now have tons of money, own this big company, but then they can't agree on things. So there's a lot of like petty differences between the main cast of the original book, which makes it very hard for them to like come to terms with anything. So we follow that. Now, what I think is kind of problematic is that the way that Ernest Cline talks about gender and sexuality, he talks about kind of this like futuristic world where using a specific kind of technology, we're sort of able to live through someone else's existence. So he's kind of saying by living through the existence of someone who is maybe gay or bi or non-binary or asexual or transgender, you have more empathy towards that type of person, and maybe it makes you more open to your own sexuality. I don't know. I feel like some people are going to read it and they're going to just immediately be set off and say, that's not how gender or sexuality works. And I don't necessarily know that I think that's how it works, but I did appreciate like just this kind of interesting futuristic take on maybe what could happen, you know, because gender and the way we talk about gender has changed so much in the past 10, 20, 30 years. And I think it's perfectly feasible to say that it probably will change quite a bit more in the next 10, 20, 30 years. So while I don't know if I agreed with his thoughts on where it would go, I thought it was interesting to see a prediction of it. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Overall, I think the main thing that people will have problems with this book, though, taking away all of those issues, the thing that I think is going to be a make it or break it deal is the main character, Wade, or Parzival, as he's called in the game. Ultimately, he is incredibly dislikable in this book. He is not a character you'll root for. He is... And the author makes no qualms about it. Like, he is a jerk. And getting a bunch of money and becoming rich and powerful makes him into a jerk. And they talk a lot about that. I thought that was really interesting. I thought it was really interesting to see a character just become such a jerk bag. And I am very open to characters that are imperfect, characters that are not necessarily super likable. So I was willing to go along with it. But I have seen a lot of people complain that they really did not like how unlikable he was. I don't know. It's a book that I feel like you have to read and think about and make a decision for yourself, because there are things that I really enjoyed and there are things that I think were just big misses. It's kind of a book that feels a little all over the place. And it's also a book, I'll mention, I thought this was interesting. When I first finished the book, I was like, okay, well, that was fun. Was it as good as the first book? No. But it was fun. But it's a book that the more I think about, the more I find issues with. You know what I mean? Like, I think more about it and I think, wow, Artemis really was just even more of a love interest in this book. And I just think about things that happen in the book that I'm like, oh, that seems a little off, or that seemed a little weird. It's a hard book. It's a hard book to rate. It's a hard book to review. Ready Player One, ultimately, and Ready Player Two, to me, having critical conversations about them is on par with having critical conversations about like the newest Transformer movie. Because at the end of the day, I think they're just like blockbuster, you know, movies that you go and see in the summer because you want to see some explosions, right? And I think to have let's have a deep critical conversation about Transformers. Like, I don't think you would do that unless maybe you were like a huge Transformers fan. And that's kind of how I feel about this book. What a way to end November, right? Guys, that is everything that I read in November. It was kind of a weird month. It was a mixed bag of a month, but I'm very excited about December. I have so many books on my list that I'm excited to read. I think December is going to be an awesome reading month for me. If you're not already following me on Instagram and TikTok, make sure to do that, because that's where I post. I post every single day about what I'm reading, what I'm doing about reading. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I talked about today. I know this was a little different than normally my videos like, oh my God, I love this book. Oh my God, I love this book. This month I'm like, oh, I don't know. But let me know your thoughts. And of course, I want to say this just because some of the books that I talked about today have more sensitive issues, and some of the things I talked about deal with more sensitive issues. Just remember that if you are going to comment and you want to talk about these things, I think it's great to have discussions, but please, as always, please be respectful of each other. That is the #1 most important thing to me when talking about books and literature, is that we are respectful of each other despite our different opinions about the literature that we're talking about. But I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you have a wonderful December. Please read great books. And of course, make sure to like and subscribe. I hope you see you back here sometime soon. And as always, Happy reading.